Chapter 8, Adolescence. So we're looking at physical and cognitive development. Let's start with physical. What is the difference between adolescence and puberty? Well, adolescence refers to the social transition from being a child to being an adult, whereas puberty refers more to the physical changes that allow a person to become sexually mature and be able to reproduce. Now, a lot of changes are happening during the teen years, during adolescence. So there's physical changes, puberty, as well as cognitive changes and psychosocial growth. During this time, teens can engage in risky behavior patterns, including drinking, smoking, maybe doing drugs, getting involved in risky sexual behavior, gang activity, car accidents, and things of that sort. So it can be a time for risky behavior, but most young people experience no major problems. So let's look at puberty a little bit more. So puberty is triggered by hormonal changes. The transition from being a child to being a sexually mature adult, being able to reproduce, takes about 4 years. It typically happens earlier with girls. It can start around age 8 to 10, somewhere in around there, and boys 9 to 12. So girls tend to go through puberty earlier. Some different changes that happen during puberty. It can be broken down into the primary sex characteristic changes that involve those, which really refers to the organs that are directly related to reproduction. So if you're talking about vagina, ovaries, fallopian tube, penis. So you're talking about the parts that are needed to be able to have sex. So those are the primary sex characteristics. Now, all the other changes, like breast development, pubic hair, those that don't involve the sex organs are referred to as secondary sex characteristics, so other changes. So adolescents experience a growth spurt, so you're going to see them shoot up in height as well as weight, and this usually will come before about 2 years before sexual maturity. So during this time, teens can become concerned about their appearance, and you'll see that girls will tend to have this growth spurt earlier. So usually maybe when kids are getting into middle school, you're going to see that the girls tend to be taller and bigger and look more mature than the boys do. And that's because girls go through puberty earlier. So sexual maturity is marked for boys by their first ejaculation, and that's usually around age 13. And for girls, it's menstruation, and that can usually be around 12 and a half. So influences on timing of puberty. If a girl wants to know about when she'll start her puberty, her mother's age of menstruation can give her some idea for when she can expect that. So some other influences on timing of puberty includes nutrition, healthcare, weight, actually punishment. If there's harsh punishment, they can actually start menstruating earlier. Depression can have an influence, as well as involvement of the father. Race can also influence it. African American girls tend to start their puberty earlier. So read through this as well as watch the video to learn more about the influences on timing of puberty. All right, so effects of timing on puberty. We see that girls that start puberty early and boys that start puberty late tend to have the hardest time adjusting to puberty. There are some risks involved with girls starting their menstruation early. And so go ahead and read through that as well as watch the video here. All right, let's talk about the adolescent brain. Lots of developmental changes happening in the brain. So it's not fully mature yet. We see that the adolescent brain is going to experience a growth spurt. Mainly that's going to happen in the frontal lobes, all right? So now the frontal lobes are responsible for reasoning, judgment, and impulse control. So the frontal lobe is going to become more developed, which is going to help them transition from making irresponsible decisions to making more mature, having better judgment. But that's going to come about throughout the teen years. So you're going to see that there's going to be some immature reasoning because the adolescent brain is not fully mature yet. Adolescents actually process information about emotions with their amygdala, whereas adults tend to use that frontal lobe, so tend to use the area that is related to reasoning and judgment and such. So adolescents, when they're presented with options, are going to tend to process that information more with their amygdala. All right, so they're going to think think with their emotions more so than adults, where adults are going to use their frontal lobe and use more reasoning, be able to control their impulses more and things like that. All right, so some of the bad decisions or irresponsible decisions that teens make are because they have an underdeveloped frontal cortical system. All right, so read through that and watch this video. So teens also are egocentric, and so we talked about how little ones are egocentric in their earlier years. Well, this egocentrism returns, and in teen years it comes about as the terms for our imaginary audience, where teens think that everyone is looking at them and that what they're wearing is so important and their life is so important, and so they think that they have this imaginary audience, all these people constantly watching them and being concerned about them, when in reality each of these teenagers, each of these people have their own lives and they're worried about themselves and not thinking so much about that teenager. But teenagers tend to think that the whole world is revolving around them and their decisions. Another type of egocentrism that occurs during the teen years is the personal fable. It's this personal story of teens thinking that they are invincible, that they are not going to get an STD, they're not going to get in a car accident and such, and that can lead to risky behavior. So read through this and watch this video. Let's look at physical and mental health. All right, so some changes are going to occur with sleep. So many teens, they're not getting enough sleep because of the demands of high school, because of the demands of their social lives. And what we're seeing is that modern high school schedules tend to be out of sync with teens' natural body rhythms. So teens experience changes in their circadian timing and with their melatonin, which is the hormone that's secreted that promotes sleep. So these changes actually will change a teenager's natural body rhythms, will make them feel tired later on. So they tend to stay up later, which can cause some fights with parents if they don't understand that these changes in wanting to sleep, not getting tired until later on, are actually normal, natural. All right, so the most common eating disorder is obesity. The U.S. teens have a less healthy diet and are more likely to be overweight than teens in other industrialized countries. So some other eating disorders include anorexia and bulimia. So please read through that. All right, so use and abuse of drugs. This part looks at the different risk factors, and that includes, having a difficult temperament, being alienated from friends, having friends that think that drug use is okay. So read through the risk factors for drug use and abuse. All right, depression. So what research shows is that depression increases during the teen years, especially among girls. It occurs in about 9% of children aged 12 through 17. What we find is that less than half are actually getting treated for the depression. So the number one cause of death in adolescence is motor vehicle accidents. That's the leading cause, as well as firearm use. Suicides can also be a cause of death in the teen years. All right, so let's look at cognitive development now. So Piaget, anytime we talk about cognitive development, you should think of Piaget. So the sentence you need to remember is smart people cook fish. So we have sensory motor, preoperative, concrete, and the last stage is formal. So adolescents, some adolescents reach the last stage of formal operations, and when they do, they can think abstractly, they can think hypothetically, they can think in terms of possibilities. So remember the video that we watched, and you can see the difference between the child that's in concrete operational and the child that's in formal operations. When asked the question about if you didn't have a thumb, remember the concrete operational child is the one that's very much in the here and now, and they're like, oh, you can't give a thumbs up. Whereas the child, well, more the teenager that is in formal operations is going to think more abstractly, have these grand ideas, say something like, wow, the person's whole life might change because they might be considered disabled. So the answer is much different, more complex, more abstract when you move into formal operations. And this formal operations is a result of all those brain changes that are happening. You know, the synaptic pruning, the growth spurt in the frontal lobe, you know, the gray matter growth, the myelination, all that type of stuff. All those changes in the brain are allowing the adolescent to be able to think more abstractly, to think more complex. All right, so there's also changes in how information is processed in adolescence. So read through the structural changes in the way that the working memory, how the working memory works in teen years, as well as how teens get better in some aspects but still are deficient in others. So read through that. All right, read through the language development area. It's going to talk about how teens are able to engage more in social perspective taking, which allows more empathy, allows more compassion in the teen years. All right, so moral reasoning. With all these cognitive changes, with all these advances in cognitive development during the teen years, we also see changes in how children, and going into the teen years, how they make moral decisions. So when you're a child, you are in the pre-conventional stage of morality, where you tend to make decisions, moral decisions, based on wanting to avoid the consequences, okay? And then you have pre-conventional, and then you have conventional. This is more child. This is more like preschoolers. This is more like school age children. And now, when you get to the conventional, children are making decisions based on really wanting to please. So not just about, you know, trying to avoid getting a time out, but wanting to please, wanting to go along with the conventions or the norms of society. And then, when you get more into the teen years, into the teen to adult years, you have post-conventional. So post-conventional is looking at how you begin to make moral decisions based on your own internal moral standards. You do things because you believe it is the right thing to do. Your moral decisions are based on your own sense of justice. So read through this carefully and watch this video that will explain Kohlberg's theory. Heinz's dilemma is a test that you can do to find out what stage of moral reasoning a child or teen is in. So Kohlberg offers this morality theory. Now Gilligan offers a more feminist theory that says that women tend to make moral decisions based more on their concern for others. They tend to make decisions on things based on how it is going to affect those that they love. So just different theories for morality. So parents, teachers, peers can encourage morality by talking about, by discussing moral issues, as well as they learn through modeling of moral behavior. All right, let's go to the last part, educational and vocational issues. So self-efficacy, or this belief in one's mastery of a situation, or this belief that that you can be successful in whatever task you're trying to accomplish, has a huge influence on school achievement. So children that have self-efficacy, that they believe in themselves, tend to do better in school. Other influences on school achievement include parenting practices. Children that have authoritative parents tend to do best in school. They tend to have the highest grade. They tend to be most popular, the most well-adjusted. And why is that? Because they have internalized this belief in themselves, as well as they've internalized a desire to do well, rather than just doing it because they're fearful of their parents. So, which a child of authoritarian parent might do. So other influences are socioeconomic status, you know, so how, if you're living in poverty, if you don't have, maybe you're hungry, you have to worry about your housing and things like that. That's going to influence your school achievement. So peer influences, quality of school, things like that also have an influence on school achievement. So go ahead and make sure to read through all that. All right, so let's talk about dropping out. So you see that about 4% of high schoolers dropped out during the 2004-2005 school year. So we still see dropping out being, an issue, and those students that are at greater risk tend to be those of lower socioeconomic status. Race can be an influence, males, so on. So go ahead and read through that. So right, so it's important that schools not only focus on memorizing and analyzing. Creativity needs to be encouraged as well if you want active engagement of the students. And then the last part is talking about gender stereotyping. Make sure to read through that and how that still sometimes occurs.